Hey guys, welcome to Rents to Drive. Today we're going to have a look at the LDRC 1899, that's this car right here, versus the old plastic chassis car, I think it's the 1802. So to sum up, my LED problems are the board. There's something wrong with the programming. The boards are compatible, but the servo centering for some reason on the new board is different than on the old board. Kind of strange, but whatever. If you swap the new board into the old car with the pop-up headlights, make sure you are prepared to adjust the headlights, because out of the box, if you just hook it up, they will not open and close properly. There will be a problem. The range of motion will be wrong. You got to adjust that. I didn't do any damage, but potentially you could do damage. So I don't advise doing that unless you actually proactively adjust things and make sure it's going to work. The radios are not compatible. You can't swap one radio for the other, unfortunately. To me, that's a bit of a bummer. Now, big downside, huge downside, when you put the plastic chassis car board into the heavy car, the gyro flutter, if anything, is worse. It's really, really bad, at least as bad as it is in the plastic car. And it doesn't work particularly well. The new model, the 1899 car with the heavy body, with the old circuit board, does not drive well. It's really, really bad, so don't even bother trying to do that. Now, the other thing I tried, I popped in this Surpass 9-gram servo in the front for the steering. Now, my take has always been that the servos in these little cars are pretty good, and I basically ordered this because I was ordering something else from the Surpass hobby site, and it was $8 or $9. It was very cheap. And because I was ordering some other stuff, there was no shipping charge. So I thought, I can always use a 9-gram servo. If it doesn't add anything to this car, I will have something else I can put it into at some point. That's not a concern. So, spoilers, don't bother, in my opinion. The stock servo works just nice. This is a metal gear servo, so it will be more durable in the new car with the metal body. There's a lot more weight. So if you are concerned about running into things, maybe you're racing with your buddies, you think there's going to be more wear and tear on the steering, definitely in that scenario, it's probably worth the money, because that metal gear drive is going to be more durable, 100%. There's no way it's less durable than the stock servo. Function-wise, I don't see a difference. I could show you it running cosmetically. There is no difference. I cannot tell just by looking at it. I replaced the front stub shafts with these metal ones. Again, I was ordering a couple of things, so I figured, all right, let's replace those stub shafts. $4. To me, they're better. It's an improvement, but it's not a night and day improvement. So let's have a look. How much play we got there? A fair bit, right? That's the play between the bearings and the stub shaft, right? That's a fair bit. Similar on both sides. Now, for example, my plastic chassis car just has some Teflon tape. Hardly any play. Like, there's practically none. I got a set of these rubber tires. You can spot them because they are on the white rims. These are a soft rubber compound. These rims are actually pretty nice. They got a very nice white glossy finish on them. They actually look pretty good, so that's an upside. They are typically well under $10 Canadian. I can't remember if I paid like $4 or $5 or like $6, $7 for these. It was one or the other. I don't quite recall. Be careful. The snowflake style rims are smaller. The tire diameter is smaller. I did a video on that if you want to see more information. If you have the RX-7 car, you can spot those tires because they have a different style rim and they have a tread pattern just around the outside. Those are the larger diameter tires. So you don't want to accidentally order ones that don't work with your car. The larger diameter ones do not work with the cars that come with the snowflakes. They're too big for the wheel openings. You're going to have some rubbing, so be aware of that. Now, do these work? I'm going to put some video in the background here showing you what it's like, and yes, they do work, and yes, they are pretty sweet. I have to say the compound seems really, really good. You can slide the car around on a fairly slick surface. The more grippy the surface, I suspect the worse the sliding. The one thing you're going to be very, very careful about is that because you get so much better traction, you can get really good speed, and with the new car, it's very heavy. So if you crash, you're potentially going to be doing some damage, not just to the car, but to stuff in the room. Coffee table legs, walls, you name it. You whack into it going full speed with this heavy car, it's going to leave a mark. Be aware of that. Now, the upside to these tires is that if you want to race with your buddies in a garage or a gymnasium or a classroom or something, someplace where you can clear out some nice space, they're pretty sweet for road racing. 100%. I can see this being a super fun car to race with your buddies. Now the downside, as I mentioned, the weight of the 1899 car with that metal body is a bit of a downside because I could see carnage happening. The plastic chassis cars, or the plastic body cars, to me are probably going to do really, really, really well because they're not going to get damaged as easy. And the rubber tires are pretty sweet. So definitely, considering how inexpensive they are, I would say they are a must-own addition for anybody that has one of these. Even if all you ever do is run the car a couple times just to see and just to mess around with it, I don't think you're going to regret spending that small amount of money. That's my 2 cents worth. So, alright, so these rubber tires, they work really good. Now I tried something, and I was a little bit surprised. I thought to myself, hey, what if I put the grippy ones on the front and leave the slippery ones on the back? Will it still drift? Will it drift better? Now, it definitely doesn't drive better, but it's 100% drivable. And the really interesting thing, the only thing really worth talking about, is that I normally drive this with the gyro turned up to pretty much 100%. Maybe, 80, 85, but past 75, I typically have the gyro set, okay? Because that's kind of where this car likes it. That's where it drives the best. Well, with those sticky tires on the front, I had to turn it down to like 50%. You don't need near as much gyro. That gives you more flexibility in playing with the settings and tuning how the car drives, potentially. Now, to me, as I said, it still drifts with the sticky tires on the front. Is it actually better? And I'm going to say no. But I also did not spend a bunch of time playing around with the suspension. I just swapped over the tires. The thing I can tell you is that the more you fart around, you can do all kinds of things by adjusting the suspension. So if you are the type that likes to play with the setup, that's another good reason to buy these rubber tires, because you slap a set on the front, and absolutely 100%, the one thing that it does do is change how this car drives dramatically. I didn't spend enough time to know that it can be done and that it'll improve things. I spent enough time to know that there's some potential there. Now, I don't have the time right now. That's why I'm making this video without giving you a conclusion. I just figured, well, that's interesting. Down the road in the winter, when it's cold and dark and I'm looking for something fun to do inside, I'm definitely going to play around with the setup some more and see if those sticky front tires can be made to drift super, super nice, right? Alright guys, before I get into this in too much detail, I want to talk about the electronics real quick in general for a second. The new car, the 1899 car with this fancy new radio, is a massive improvement. And I don't want to be too hard on LDRC because they did a very, very nice job. But I got to point out one thing. They have two steering modes. They have low rate and high rate. So low rate, the wheels don't turn as far. High rate, they turn full range of motion, right? Now, when you adjust the gyro function, that actually is a very, very useful feature. So when you run the steering in low rate, the gyro still adjusts to the full range of motion. So it gives you better control if you're twitchy. Like if you are prone to moving the steering wheel a little too much, turning down the rate lets you drift better. Now the downside is that if you really get the car squirrely, when you turn the wheel full lock, sometimes the wheels are still basically pointed straight because the gyro is doing some work, and you've kind of got yourself in a situation where you don't have enough steering anymore. What would be really, really nice is a dual rate knob. I think if they add a dual rate knob to this radio, my friends, it's almost perfect for this car. And because this board is so good, the gyro is quite nice, I really think they need to put out a version of this radio with dual rate, and you would have a perfect entry-level car. No reason to upgrade anything. I kid you not. That's how much I like this. And as it is, it's darn good. It is darn good. But that would be a legit upgrade. So hopefully somebody at LDRC watches this and they talk about this with the powers that be. And maybe down the road we'll get an even better version. And based on the way these guys are upgrading these cars over time, it wouldn't surprise me. They're doing a really nice job, in my opinion. Now, I talked about how in the new car there was a little bit of play in the suspension. So I'm going to try and show you that since I have it apart here. So as you can see that movement there? Oops, I'm trying to isolate this. Okay, I think you can clearly see play there. There is also, oh, actually this is the tightest one. Actually the backs are, you can see there's some wiggling there, right? So it's looser than on my plastic chassis car, but it's not crazy. Now, so there's a little more play in general in the suspension. For the vast majority of people, in my opinion, this is an improvement. And the reason I say that is because, to me, most people probably don't want to take this car apart and work on it. The percentage of people that do want to take the car and work on it and make it perfect, for them, to me, that's not really an improvement, because it's harder to eliminate play than it is to loosen things up. So for example, on the back end of mine, where one side was stiff, on this car right here, this corner was a problem. All I did was I took it apart and I sanded down that white plastic spacer a little bit, and I just played with it until there was just a tiny little bit of friction. Most of the play was gone. That's all I did, right? Very easy. You take it apart, you sand that thing down very gently, put it together, test it, take it apart. You just fiddle with it, and you can fix it. Eliminating play, if you wanted to get this just perfect, say you think that's a little too much play, well, that's a little more tricky. So for some people, I'm not entirely sure this is an improvement. For most people, 100% it is, because you don't want binding. So on the new car, there was zero binding anywhere on mine. Everything was very, very nice. So that's a good thing. Now, as you can see, the circuit board looks different. The 1899's got this red circuit board, and the old car has got this dark green, gray, whatever you want to call it, circuit board. Visually, that's the big difference. You can clearly see when you're dealing with one or the other. Now, cosmetically, or functionally, with the connectors and whatnot, there's very little difference. The new board has this one extra connector, which I'm not sure what it's for. Otherwise, all the connectors are the same, and you absolutely can swap the board from one car to the other. Now, there's a couple of small cautions to go with swapping the board over. Number one, if you put the new 1899 board into a plastic chassis car, like for example the NSX, the one thing you got to be aware of is that the servos are not centered the same for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that is. So the steering, when you hook up the servos to the board and you power it on, the steering's a little bit off center, and more importantly, the headlights do not seat properly. Now, I found this out the hard way, and I didn't bother adjusting anything because I was going to swap the boards back anyway. Nothing got broken in my headlights. They still work just fine hooked up to the proper board. But if you're going to swap one of the newer boards into the plastic chassis car, which I don't recommend for many reasons, which I'll elaborate on, but that's the one thing you got to definitely be careful of. You want to make sure that you disconnect the headlight servo and adjust it when you power it on. Okay, so that's the most important thing. That's a very noticeable difference right when you power them up. As I said, connectors are all the same, so it's no problem doing it. First things first. In my 1899 car, I had a problem with the rear LEDs. They were not working properly. The signaling was a little bit funny. There was some crossover on the wiring, it seemed like. I was kind of expecting a wiring problem, and in hindsight, that was probably overly optimistic on my part. Turns out, it's the circuit board. When I hook up the plastic car circuit board in the metal car body, the signal lights work perfectly. So it's 100% compatible electronically as far as the signal lights and stuff go, and it works just perfectly. So the problem with my signal lights is actually the board. Now the downside is that that's hard to fix, because essentially it's most likely a programming problem. So firmware edition did not have the code perfectly tuned up to work those lights properly. It is what it is. So if you get one that has that problem, unfortunately, not an easy fix. You probably need to order a new circuit board. Dollar-wise, questionable whether or not that's going to be worth it. Alright, now the other thing, as you'll know if you've paid any attention to these, the gyro function on the new car is 100% different from the old car. Not 100% meaning 100% totally different, meaning 100% there is a difference. Now, I was wondering whether that was the weight of the car that was making the gyro flutter less. It is not. If you put this board into the plastic chassis car, the plastic chassis car does not drive night and day better. The weight is a big factor in how well the gyro works in the new car. The metal body, that extra weight, it's definitely the gyro and whatnot. The setup in this electronics is definitely set up with the weight of that body in mind. So when you put it into the much lighter car, to me it didn't work as well. Now I don't have any video. It really wasn't worth the effort to shoot it, so I didn't. I apologize, but my advice, I don't know that it's worth spending the money, because you need the board and the radio. The radios are not compatible. And at that point, you're spending quite a bit of money, and you can improve the plastic chassis car with a gyro for the same or less, potentially. So I don't see that it really being worth it, but that's up to you. Now, big downside, huge downside, when you put the plastic chassis car board into the heavy car, the gyro flutter, if anything, is worse. It's really, really bad, at least as bad as it is in the plastic car. And it doesn't work particularly well. The new model, the 1899 car with the heavy body, with the old circuit board, does not drive well. It's really, really bad, so don't even bother trying to do that. I replaced the front stub shafts with these metal ones. Again, I was ordering a couple of things, so I figured, alright, let's replace those stub shafts. $4. To me, they're better. It's an improvement, but it's not a night and day improvement. So let's have a look. How much play we got there? A fair bit, right? That's the play between the bearings and the stub shaft, right? That's a fair bit. Similar on both sides. Now, for example, my plastic chassis car just has some Teflon tape. Hardly any play. Like, there's just practically none. Right? This play, that's the steering. You can see the, right? Very little play there. And so all I did to do that, took a little bit of Teflon tape, and this is pipe fitting tape, gas pipe fitting tape. It's thicker. There's also white Teflon tape that's for small copper fittings. That is much thinner. And all you do is take a piece of the tape, and I wrapped it over the top of the pin, so over the top, then you press it into the bearing, boop, and then that makes it tight. And then all you do is whatever's sticking out the end, you just trim it off with an X-Acto knife, make it smooth. Once you put it together in the car, or sorry, it's in the car. You put the tire on, you spin it a little bit. If there's a little bit of binding, that's going to go away very, very quickly because Teflon tape will get chewed up really easily if there's interference. And then all you're left with is the Teflon tape that's around the bearing and keeping it in place. And then the shaft inside is turning smoothly because the bearing is turning, right? The inside of the bearing is turning. Oops, not showing this very well. Zoop, zoop, right? The bearing, if the outside is tight, the inside turns. That's how a bearing works, right? So you're adding your Teflon tape so that the pin is tight on the inside, and the only play is going to be whatever play the bearing has. That's how it works. And like I said, you can use the thick stuff, the yellow, that's gas pipe fitting tape, or you can use the thin stuff, that's white, and that's just copper pipe fitting tape. If the thick stuff is too thick, what you can do is you can use a narrower strip so that the entire surface is not covered, and then squeeze it in there, and it's not going to be quite as tight, right? Takes a bit of fiddling. Once you get the hang of it, very, very easy. It is not super difficult, and in these little cars, it holds up really well. You get a decent amount of durability out of it. So that's how you fix loose bearings. And like I said, in the metal car, those metal stub shafts, they're definitely an upgrade. They're not perfect, as you can see by the play. So, you know, if you don't need to spend that money, I would spend the money on Teflon tape before I spend the money on the stub shafts. One thing I found when I was fine-tuning the front end on my metal car, one of the bearings was bad. It was very grindy. It definitely had a problem. And fortunately, I had some bearings kicking around. I believe they are 5 by 8 by 2.5, if I remember correctly. So I just swapped in one of those. Problem solved. Away we go. Typically in Canada, you can buy 10 of those for $10. Worst case, $12. Best case, $8. So less than, you know, in the dollar each range. Not super expensive. And there are 8 in the car, so 10 of them is not a copious amount. Basically, in these cars, if you drive them inside, you're probably never going to need bearings, you know, under normal circumstances because they're not going to get very dirty. If you drive these in dusty conditions and you never clean the bearings, at some point you're probably going to want to. In conclusion, electronics-wise, the new 1899 car with the heavy body, I am officially on board. It definitely drives better than the old cars. It is an improvement. It's way, way different. And out of the box, that kind of threw me. And if you watch my review, I left in all my waffling because I really was torn. But at this point, I am 100% on board with the new car. It's way, way, way better. What the new car should be worth, as I've mentioned in the past, I got it for a whopping $67, steal of a deal. The full price ticket, the absolute max in Canadian dollars, is about $110 to $120. That's kind of pricey in my opinion. For $90, which is fairly common at this point, as best as I can tell, pretty good deal. Not terrible value. And if you are inclined to wait and see if it goes on sale, pay attention to AliExpress. They have a lot of sales. You can probably get a better deal. Although I might have got this cheap because they knew that circuit board had a problem. Right? It's a distinct possibility. That's how these things tend to work. All right, so that's the electronics. So we've gone over the electronics. We've gone over the radios. We've gone over the stub shafts. We've gone over the suspension setup. We've gone over the problem with the circuit board. We've gone over the new servo, which did not do much. We've gone over the differences in the circuit boards. We've gone over the similarities, which is almost everything. We have summed up that the radios don't work directly swappable. I think that's it, my friends. And yes, my final conclusion on the 1899 Skyline with the metal body, huge improvement. Definitely worth the money. I really, really like the car. Alright guys, that's it for this edition of Wrench to Drive, where we ask the eternal question, do you drive to wrench or do you wrench to drive? See you next time.